Welcome back to another episode of the Stop and Pop. I have Cody Spicer here, and today we're going to talk about the Rockets. So, Cody, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How about yourself, Jarrett?
Doing good, doing good.
Cool.
So, first things first, I wanted to ask you.
Mhm.
So, you are Texas, right? You're in Texas.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, when did you start liking the Rockets? When you start watching them?
So it's a little bit of a weird story. Uh, I'd always kind of like followed the NBA very casually, the Steph, LeBron, KD stuff. But I didn't really like pick a team, which is weird because I work right across the street from the American Airlines Center, so you think I'd be a Mavs fan. Um, but over kind of the last finals, for whatever reason, something just stuck, and I was like, okay, I'm going to follow real in detail. I'm going to pick some teams I like so I can go into next season. And I picked up watching FIBA over the summer. Not a lot of Rockets guys there, but that evolved into the season. And then, of course, the Rockets get hot early in the season. And they're one of the young teams that I'm like, okay, that's one that I'm going to mark on the calendar that I'm going to watch. And I think they're interesting for a young team. I mean, you have your OKCs, your Orlandos, your Pacers to an extent, and they all kind of feel like they've got it together. And those moments happen with the Rockets, but there's a lot of moments where it doesn't look like that. And
Mhm.
there's a lot I think that goes into it, but I think they're maybe just a little earlier on in that process.
Mm-hmm. That is true. I watch Rockets games sometimes, and sometimes they do seem like they have it figured out. And it'd be some games it's like, okay, what are you doing? It was like I think the last game they played in, Jabari Smith tried to save the ball and it went right off of Jalen Green's face.
Yeah.
And that was one of those young plays. It's like, okay, like still got to remember they're really young. They're still
Mhm.
trying to figure it out, still trying to build that chemistry.
Yeah, they're definitely like one of the other teams. Like I follow a bunch of young teams because I think this is like a great time to get into the NBA because there's so many options.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people talk about inexperience with OKC, and I understand why, but I think you see it significantly more with Houston. And kind of the way I think about it, at least, is they're basically, aside from Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks and some of the vets like Jeff Green, might as well all be in the rookie season.
Yeah.
Like the previous years before Ime Udoka came in, don't count that as development because not a lot happened.
Good
He
point.
comes in, sets that culture, brings in some defensive minded guys that'll hustle. Might as well count Jalen Green as a rookie. Might as well count Sengun as a rookie and just reset all of them basically.
Yeah.
And that's the vibe you get when you watch them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that because Silas, I feel like he wasn't the coach that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Previous years, they've been struggling for so long. I honestly don't even know when's the last time it was really that good, except like when James Harden was there for us. But
Yeah.
even last year with James Harden, before like the trade happened, it was just seemed like it was so much uncertainty what was going to happen with that team because it seemed like they kept swapping out a lot of veterans on that team and trying to figure out who would stick. And
Yeah.
ultimately, none of them even stayed there. So then now we have this influx of young guys with some vets. So it seems like they're still trying to figure things out.
Yeah. I think that like you look back at kind of that late Harden era, it almost reminds me of like how the Hawks are right now, where they can't really figure out the Trey Young fit. Now, of course, it's a little different, but it's hard to build around a player that's got a bunch of unique abilities, and you can't really put him in just, oh, he's a playmaker, oh, he's a scorer. It's he does a lot of other things. So when you put someone else on the floor, it gets in his way. Whereas once they got off of Harden and kind of went into this rebuild mode, yeah, with Silas, they didn't really have any like a direction.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the long run, Rafal Stone was like, yeah, we have Jalen Green. We see potential. We just don't have anyone to develop him. Like we just gave him the keys, and that doesn't develop you in most of the cases. Even with people trying to come from G League up, it just isn't a direct correlation if you're coming from Ignite most of the time.
Yeah. I feel like I like the young talent that they do have. I do want to touch a little bit more on Jalen Green,
Mhm.
second overall pick in 2021,
Mhm.
averaging 18 points right now. I feel like he hasn't made a lot of progress. Of course, like you said, because he hasn't been developed the way he should. Um, touch more on that. Like, what do you think it's really missing in his game to take that next step?
So I think there's a couple ways you could look at it. I think the front office signaled with bringing in Ime Udoka and bringing in Fred VanVleet and bringing in Dylan Brooks all at once for kind of not in the same deal, but in a short span.
Yeah.
They were pretty much signaling, okay, we're not really going to count on Jalen Green as a playmaker. Like he'll create for himself, but we're not trying to make him a Trae Young. We're not trying to make him that real floor general-esque type guy.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to try to make him a lockdown defender because that's never going to happen. That's why we got Dylan Brooks. We bring in a more defensive, kind of hustly type coach. Where do we leave Jalen Green? Is he just going to be a shooting guard as an independent scorer? And I think that's why a lot of people this year, once Amin Thompson and Cam Whitmore started playing, were like, oh, we could replace him if we wanted to, because they don't do exactly the same thing, but they do it close enough and do a little extra to where it kind of balances out. But I think the biggest thing, and I think this year will kind of be the first litmus test for this, is he's super inconsistent. And that's a pretty typical trademark of rookies. They'll go in, they'll have like a 20, 25 point game. The next night, it's a 4 point game. Jalen Green's done that his whole career. Like, I had to look this up because I was curious. 2021, 2022, his rookie season, he had 13 games overall where he scored single digits. Got much better his second year, 22, 23. It was only 2 games. So he was at least getting a little more consistent, staying in double digits. But this year, and I think this comes with the change, he's had 10 games where he's single digit scoring. And when that's your one hallmark, you try to have to figure something out or look other places. I think Rafael Stone had said at some point, give Jalen Green till year 4, maybe with this in mind, that if we can't make him a consistent scorer, a consistent, like, this is our second guy, we can count on 10, 15 points reasonably every night, maybe we try to help build some deficits in other areas. He's one thing I will say this year, even with this single digit point game issue, he has become a better team defender. I think largely that's Ime Udoka and the pieces they put around him kind of isolate him a little, but he's at least not getting just driven by all of the time. Like, as long as he's not isolated out one side of the floor by himself, he can usually get in the way. Um, and one of the things I think a lot of people were really high on, very reasonably so, when he got drafted in over the last few years, is he'll have relatively similar numbers of 30-point games that he does single point games. So when he's hot, he's hot. It's just you can't count on him, and it's hard to build a team around that. And I think that's why people were saying, hey, maybe we start Amin Thompson because we at least expect him to do that because he's a rookie and he's at least better defensively. And that's where the Rockets were doing good at the beginning of the year, was they were locking teams down and just kind of doing what Orlando does, or the Timberwolves as well, where they don't have to score a lot. They just have to score slightly more than you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the Rockets have to make a decision. But I'm not going to write Jalen Green off because I think this is just looking back going to be his rookie year, basically.
Yeah, I can agree with that. He's really streaky, really consistent. I did realize that he has had a lot of single digit games. Um, I personally expected him to be by now at least like a 25-point scorer, even with all the pieces on your team, but it hasn't turned out that way yet. So the next thing I want to touch on is Alperen Sengun.
Mhm.
Do you feel like he's a future All Star? I feel like he's a carbon copy of Jokic.
I think he
So
can be. I think it depends on how the Rockets approach it. A lot of people had said not nearly as high on Sengun last year, but a lot of people were starting to see this could be our guy. Like we could move off Jalen Green. This could be our future one guy out of our next big three lineup or whatever. This year has kind of cemented that. I do think there will be a point that he is in all-star conversations, but as hard as it is to get into all-star games right now, it may be a little difficult. But I think he'll make at least a few in his career. Um, it just if you know if the Rockets decide to stick on him and focus on him and kind of build around him, 100% he's going to be there one day. If the Rockets continue to do what they've done since they drafted him, he's not just like he's done amazingly well for being a guy that's kind of neglected by his franchise. Um, but I think that he'll get there either way. It just I don't know if it's going to be on the Rockets.
fair, very fair. Yeah, because I, for one, when I watched him play, I was really high on him. I said, this guy is really good. He just needs the opportunity to really show what he can do.
Yeah.
And I feel like towards the end of the last season, he was starting to show those flashes, and then this year it really took off. I feel like they
Yeah.
need to run the offense through him a little more for
Mhm.
him to really show what he can do because he's really good. He has the basketball in his hands.
Yeah, I think that's in bringing in Fred VanVleet helped that a lot. Their two-man game is like the most solid thing they can run.
Mm-hmm.
So like if they don't get or even look to get another playmaker that can do that kind of stuff with Shangoon, I think Fred VanVleet's going to go through his whole contract.
Mm-hmm.
But you never know. I mean, Thompson or Cam Whitmore, even though they've never been sold on the ability to play make or play a like really extensive two-man game like that, they could. That's always a possibility. But Fred VanVleet was, I think, a good pickup for them for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Agree with that. Next person I wanted to touch on with is the Thompson twin.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about him? I remember Gilbert Arenas was saying how I'm not sure if it was a Sora or Amen, but he was basically saying, you're a top pick. You're not someone I want to build around if you're not living up to that star potential that is ultimately what people expect when you're a top pick. I feel like you can build around players who are defensive stars. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be an offensive star to really make an impact on the game, especially if you're a high pick. Like, a lot of teams see players as, all right, we can build our defense around this guy. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know that Gilbert Arenas knew which one he was talking about either.
Mm-hmm.
He's had some out of pocket takes before,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think especially with this draft, we saw a lot of guys that either were just kind of immediately prepared to come into the league or were like high defensive prospects. Both the Thompson twins, Wimby, of course. Cason Wallace has been really great defensively. That's where he's hung his hat. Jaime Jaquez Jr. has been great, a little bit more offensive minded, but he came in ready to play. Brandon Miller's effectively the same way in that regard. And I think you're starting to see teams recognize that more. That it's less of like, I guess they probably recognized with Luca and Trey Young when they came in, these guys are defensive black holes. Like these guys are big negatives on the defensive sides. You have to isolate them, build around them. And the more defensive guards and wings, these good point of attack defenders are super valuable because there's not a ton of them in the league. So yeah, you can build around them. And I think the Thompson twins have the upside that they can be taught to shoot the ball, at least from a mid range, and be effective at it. Their three shot may never come uh, is a realistic means of offense, but you have a good shooting coach. You can fix a lot of those things over a few years. And they're not like horrible offensively. They're just not, that's not their selling point. So I think the Rockets definitely see him as a staple moving forward. And if you like, if for whatever reason a trade did come up and they had to move off one of their young guys that's got a name to him, I'd probably think it'd be Cam Whitmore more than it would be Asar Thompson. Obviously, Whitmore went further down, but like they both play kind of a similar game. They're these very athletic, physical guys that are going to drive at the rim. Just Whitmore, I think, slightly better at shooting right now.
I feel like if like you said, if they had to come off of one of those young players, I feel like it would be Cam Whitmore.
Mhm.
I feel like Thompson has the potential to be that guy they go forward with. But I do like Cam Whitmore coming off the bench for them. I
Mhm.
do like his offensive production. He's a little bit of a chuck. I've seen somebody on Threads talk about how when he gets in the game, he's looking to shoot no matter what. I mean, sometimes you need those type of guys in your lineup that's willing to take those shots.
Yeah.
Give me your assessment of Cam Whitmore.
I mean, I think you're getting a more developed version of what they wanted and kind of expected Jalen Green to be. Like they
Mm-hmm.
knew Jalen Green was kind of a spotty shooter to begin with, and Cam Whitmore is kind of the same. But like they just didn't give him the green light they gave Jalen Green. Like Jalen Green's volume has always been crazy. Cam Whitmore is a little bit more restrained, but that's largely, I think, because he's on the floor with Amin a lot and Amin doesn't shoot a ton.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes up for that. But yeah, I mean, Cam Whitmore was definitely the steal of the draft. Like, I'm sure there are a lot of reasons teams had to not take him up until the 20s or whatever he went in. But like, yeah, he came out with a vengeance. He was gonna prove y'all
Mm.
messed up. I meant to. I was a lottery pick and y'all missed me. Um, but yeah, I think that's part of what makes that team fun is there's a bunch of guys that are really athletic that drive to the rim that can do these pretty elaborate physical finishes. And they're still young, so some of them aren't quite there, but they try it anyway. And you have other pieces around them to where most nights they're competitive, regardless of who they're playing most of the time.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that. Next question I wanted to ask you was Dylan Brooks. Give me your assessment on him and why do you feel like a team needs someone like Dylan Brooks, despite all the antics and everything?
I think Dylan Brooks in his antics, I think for whatever reason fit Houston. I don't know why, but there's just a vibe that I'm like, yeah, that guy he fits here for some reason. No one else acts like that, but I get it. Aside from that, he's kind of it's like OKC and Lou Dort. Like sometimes he gets hot from three, and that's great. That's icing on the cake. You didn't count on that at all. But every night he's going to be on the opposing team's best player. Sometimes he shuts him down, sometimes he doesn't. But he is there to make sure that Alpi and Jabari Smith Jr.'s jobs are easier.
Yeah.
Like you have to have someone at the point of attack, or else your rim protectors are just not gonna be able to stop everything. But yeah, I mean, I think he gets a lot of undeserved hate, but he's also plays into it. One of the first like real in-game experience I had with Dylan Brooks, like when I started watching, I had to do a deep dive on a bunch of history stuff because I'm like, I kind of need to know what this is. But that was around the time FIBA was going, and he was on Team Canada, and I forgot which round it was, but they played Slovenia, uh, or Serbia, whichever team Luka was playing for. I can't remember at this point. One of those.
Slovenia.
Yeah, Slovenia. Dylan Brooks gets ejected, and like almost immediately after Luka gets ejected, and the camera cuts to the hallway with Dylan Brooks, and he's like all happy and excited about it because he knows he pretty much just got Luka kicked out of the game. And I was like, yeah, that's Dylan Brooks. That's all I need to know about
I
this
remember
man.
that. I forgot all about that.
He's got his little boxing gloves on, punching the
Mhm.
the coaches and stuff.
I literally forgot all about that. Like that was hilarious. I was like, yeah, this guy is something else.
Yeah, this guy's gonna do what he wants, regardless
Mhm.
of what happens to him.
Yeah, so the last question I wanted to ask you. So for the Rockets to be a playoff team, what do
Mhm.
they need? So right now they're 25 and 31, which is 12th in the West. Do you
Yep.
think they can make the playoffs next year, or is it going to be like a probably like a next year thing or years down the line?
Uh, so it depends on the route they go as far as who they choose to focus development on. Um, I mean, if Jalen Green gets consistent and can do like a little bit more playmaking or develop a better outside shot, then I think definitely they're in play in conversations at the very least next year or the year after. But I wouldn't be like they're the one team in the West that I think has a chance to get into the play in. They have one of the easier schedules remaining. Let me see. Yeah, they've got the 23rd easiest schedule, or they're in that list. So they're in the bottom half of the league in terms of facing teams under 500. And the teams directly ahead of them, you have Utah. They pretty much already said we're not really going to try to make a run. We're focusing on playing Taylor Hendricks more. We got rid of Kelly Olynyk and Okai Abaji. This is kind of what they did last year. They're like, it's not our year. It's a very, I think it was Sam Presti or Mark Daignault had said for the Thunder, when we make the playoffs, that we don't want it to be an appearance. We want to be a rival or be an arrival. I think the Jazz are going to be very similar to that. That they develop, they get some new guys. A couple of years down the line, they're going to make a deep playoff run and kind of surprise a lot of people. Outside of that, the Warriors have been playing well, but I'm still not sure well enough that they put them out of the realm of possibilities. They are 4.5 games back. So they're running out of time, but the Warriors also have an easy schedule. So the Warriors will probably rise. The Lakers, the Suns, they might get towards that danger level where the Rockets could jump them. But I also don't know that the Rockets are really going to make a concerted effort. They're already kind of in the clear for this year, like bringing on Ime Udoka, Dylan Brooks, Fred VanVleet, spending a bunch of money. They needed to at least show some results, and they're already above their win totals from the last 2 years. So tack a couple more on, get close to 30. I think most people are satisfied with that. Probably make some moves in the off season. Maybe not big trades, but try to replace some of the vets that may be expiring or things like that. And yeah, I mean, this is a team I don't foresee them being like solid playoff. Like they're not going to be in the top 6 in the next couple of years, I don't think. But they could get to that point where they're that team you don't want to face in the play in. If they make it out, that's the team that's going to ruin a bunch of people. Like they
Mm-hmm.
just beat the Suns, who, yeah, they didn't have Bradley Beal, but I think at this point, that's kind of the Suns. Like they're going to miss somebody important. They, for whatever reason, are just really hard for OKC to play. That would be another team you don't want to face. They're going to be like any of the high powered offenses, the Mavs kind of play into this as well, are going to have some troubles with them if everyone's on the floor. And if Jalen Green's not having a good game and you need him in Thompson to play 35 minutes again off the bench, you're at least getting defensive effort out there that's going to have, yeah, they're probably not going to take a series, but they're going to at least scare some people.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that with the young talent they have, they can make some moves in the offseason, get off some of those vets, bring in some players who can fit their system more, fit Ime Udoka's system more.
Mhm.
Um, I think that they just need probably like one more piece. Um, Maybe Jabari Smith can make that leap next year because I feel like he has a lot of talent, a lot of potential. I just feel like he
Yeah.
just has to really play it together. But I feel like they can ultimately be a team that pushes for the play in, and probably not this year, but definitely like the next few seasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if they did end up with like a 6 seed, I wouldn't be like horribly surprised, but I just don't get that vibe from their current construction. If they do end up trying to figure something out with Jalen Green or him, I mean, Thompson or Cam Whitmore take a leap in the offseason, then yeah, absolutely. I think it's just the problem of who does. Because if it's not Jalen Green, I wouldn't be surprised if he demands a trade if he's not starting games. Which seems to be his big hitch for whatever reason. That not playing as much is fine. It's just he's got to be the starter. He's not coming off the bench. And what we've seen is he's not closing games. I mean, Thompson's closing games. So
Yeah.
if he's cool with that, I think that's fine, but you're hampering your starts. And that's something they've said, at least the last few games, has been a problem. They just get into a deficit in the first or second quarter. They have to dig themselves out. And they do a good job. Just if they didn't start the deficit, they'd probably win a lot more games. So it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, I definitely think so. But I want to thank you for being on, Cody. Tell everybody your Threads handle so they can follow you, and tell them about your podcast that you want to start.
Oh, of course. So my Threads handle is Are They Good NBA? I've been posting typically daily my predictions and the games I'm watching. Oddly enough, most of the time the games I'm watching are not really pivotal. It's a lot of Rockets, Hornets, Magic games, or Thunder games as well. You can find me on Twitter if you're over there. I do the same thing over there, but it's Twitter's more for news right now. I think like Shams and Woj notifications are popping off over there. That for whatever reason I don't get that on Threads. And at the start of the year, I started a YouTube channel called Are They Good? And it's basically just looking at a team, organization, a player, asking that question. So if you're more casual in the NBA like I was, and you don't know, hey, are the Magic good? 20-minute video will tell you are the players good? Is the coaching staff good? And is the front office good?
So a whole breakdown of the teams. I love it.
Yeah, it's fun. I've had to do a little research on some of the front office people, but it's been doing pretty well. I'm really excited. I'm working on adding something a little new, a little different to the Timberwolves one, which will come out in March, April. And until then, I might do my first player. I think I'm thinking Josh Giddey, but we'll see.
Okay, we'll see. Kim, listen, I'm looking forward to it. It was a pleasure having you on, and keep doing what you're doing. I love it.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem. Have a good one.
You too. Bye bye.